Yes, if you look at the clock, it is Biden time. Welcome to Biden time. I'm Christian Blatt, as always, and joined by Scott Moore, the S Man himself. Scott, welcome to the show. Great to see you. So I'm
Yeah.
reading over the infrastructure bill. I'm reading about building back better, which I still don't love that as branding, but it almost feels like it's something that's translated from another language and it lost something to build back better. You read that great, it's a tremendous success, but then the Congressional Business Office is like, I don't know if we can spend all this money. Hold on. So it's like, is it good? Is it happening? Or are there still too many things that can hold it up that'll make it even a bigger disaster? What's your assessment on where we are with the infrastructure bill? Are we building back better?
We are indeed. I mean, it's a
Okay.
done deal because it's now going to President Biden's desk for his signature. So, obviously, the next challenge will be how it's allocated to states, and that's going to be more in the devil's in the details there and how that's allocated
Sure.
out to various states and various places. But that part of is done essentially. Now it's just figuring out the more of the social infrastructure and the other things that they're still squabbling about to get that bigger portion done. And that's going to be the next challenge, which that's not done
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm wondering your thoughts on, Joe Manchin has said that he feels that you could actually make the social aspect of, the social infrastructure bill is the quote that he used. If you do some what they call means testing, like do people need this money? And I mean the easy simple way to boil it down is when it comes down to like, everybody gets social security, like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk will get, checks from the government that they don't need. And it always seems like such a simple idea of like, yeah, people who need it should get it, and people who don't need it, why would they get it? But it always seems like a sticking point. It's like they get enough in tax breaks that's, I don't know, 10 times, 100 times over what they would get in a month. What do you think that Joe Manchin has a point as it regards to, let's only give money to people who can prove that they need it? Or does that get into too sticky of an area of who determines who needs it?
Well, yeah, I do. I think means testing is a great little political pop phrase that's been around for a very long time,
Sure.
and it doesn't really hold up. And look, I personally was very frustrated myself because I did not get any of the COVID relief stuff because they cut it off. If you make X amount of money, they just cut you off completely. So I never got anything from the state of California or federally, and any of the times that they did the stimulus payments to people. So I understand that feeling a bit where it's like, well, if I wasn't working, I could very easily have needed that money as well. And again, it always comes down to where do you cut that off? Because at some point, that person that's making $1 more is now all of a sudden not going to get it than the person that's making that dollar less. Like there's always going to be a threshold there, and it's going to leave people out that are maybe right on the line that could ostensibly use that money or those services more than the person who's making slightly less. So it is a very sticky situation because again, where is that line, and how do you put that line in there? And it's understandable that you don't want to just give out free money, like you said. I mean, there always is a point about Social Security given to everybody, but it's the same thing with everything else. So they'll also be eligible for Medicare when they turn 65. There's certain things that, as a society, that we do that we cover everybody, regardless of your status. And yes, I mean, it seems a little odd, but it is there for a reason. And when you have billions of dollars, you can take Medicare, and then you can add your Cadillac plan and have whatever insurance you want on top of it. Um, so it, I understand where people come from on this, but it is a sticky situation. One, where you draw that line, and two, if we're collectively there for everybody as society, there is certain things that we would do um, that cover everybody, regardless of your status, your your salary, your background, who you are, because then it starts coming into a stickier situation of where you cut that line off at. And that's part of the problem, where means testing sounds great on paper, but it's just more of a political buzzword that doesn't take a practical look at what's going on the ground level, day to day, for everybody.
Well, if you'd wanted to get that COVID relief, Scott, you should have done what I did and pretend that you have kids. I mean, I post a lot of pictures of kids, but have you ever actually seen me with those kids? And
I know, right?
they,
It's true.
yeah, you
Like,
know,
good point.
and the amount of money that I got was surprising a couple of times. And I think I
Hmm.
didn't get that. I feel like there was one more that I thought I was getting that I didn't, but they must have run out of money. But that's all right.
Right.
So we've got
Because
this
I am not
infrastructure.
rich. I am not rich by any stretch, and I'm like, man, I am like very, especially out here in California, very middle class. I'm like, so I get
Yeah,
where it comes down to, where they drew the line right at a very close amount, and I was never on it. I was just over that every time. So I get it. When you're talking about means testing, it does happen
yeah,
for social programs and stuff, but at the same time, it's like unemployment is an X amount, regardless if you're a CEO or you're working at the restaurant as an entry level job. It's the same amount. Obviously, if you get past a certain salary cap, but again, it's the same thing, regardless of what your everyday salary is. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to it, but it's just not easy to carry out.
yeah. Yeah, Scott is what we would consider Alabama rich, but California,
Right.
it doesn't go nearly as far. So, how important is it to get out there for President Biden and the Democrats to be like, we did this thing, and it's more than $1 trillion, and here's what it's going to mean for you. I mean, making people aware of the positive impact they're going to have of it. And I guess, should that really be the focus the rest of the year? To you've gotten the votes that you need, just barely, like anything. But what should the approach be now? Is really just publicizing it? I mean, President Biden, I think, is at the port in Baltimore today, because that's one of the shipping areas that is still doing reasonably well. So, I mean, he's already out there. Should it just be a lot more of that, and streamline the message to build back better?
Well, yeah, I think we talked about this the last couple of weeks. Is that Democrats have a messaging problem? They always have. Republicans are better about making things into value voters, and talking about values and everything else. And right now, all that everybody's talking about, including the media, is just the price tag, how much it costs, how much it costs. But nobody really is digging in to talk about, no pun intended there, digging in to really talk about what is in the plan. And that is what's important, because the more that people know what's really going to be in the plan and what this money's going towards, the more people will be happy to support it. And a lot of the Republicans that did not vote for it will be the first in line to take pictures when it comes down to ribbon cutting ceremonies in their own local towns and states, and to be able to be like, oh, look at this great new thing that we're doing, even though they didn't vote for it. So infrastructure is really a bipartisan, always has been. It's now, when the Republicans trying to go for the sound bites and everything, will call it socialism, and they won't vote for it. But the more that people learn about it, the happier they will be. And that's why you do see a lot of big businesses supporting infrastructure. Because again, we've talked about this ad nauseum as well. When we have a good, solid infrastructure in place, it helps everything. It helps the economy, because now you have shipping lanes that are ready to go. You help with the bottlenecks, with some of the issues we've been having with shipping. When you have good roads and you have even good broadband and internet, it's just a way for businesses to move uh, goods across the country easier. It's good for connecting with your customers when you have solid broadband and internet everywhere. This is all winning for businesses as well, knowing that they have good, dependable roads, bridges, electrical grids, water, all the things that you need for a healthy society and a healthy economy do start with good infrastructure. And we are woefully behind. And it really is embarrassing when you see how old a lot of our airports are, the type of plumbing we're still using with big lead pipes that are built at the turn of the last century. into the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they're still actively being used. The old power lines, that part of the reason is that we've had a lot of wildfires start out here in the West because power lines are old and they arc. And the next thing they know, they break and they start wildfires. So, all these things do help when you harden infrastructure, and it also helps us bounce back from these more occurring natural disasters. Now we've seen it time and time again the past decade with more intense hurricanes making landfall, multiple hurricanes making landfall in the same general area, the wildfires. All this hardening your infrastructure is also going to help us bounce back quicker economically as well as a society. So the more they can sell what's actually in the plan rather than the actual price tag, the better it'll be, because it'll not just help Democrats, but it's going to just help everyday citizens understand what's going to be in this and how it will make a difference for them personally.
And a lot of this infrastructure work you're talking about, when it comes to replacing power lines, road work, building bridges, all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Do you feel like there should be any concern? I mean, literally this morning I went to a Starbucks that had a sign in the window that said that we have to close at 5 o'clock today because of staffing shortages. And you're seeing that, fairly common. I mean, I'm hearing people talk about places that just aren't open, like big companies with, not like small little mom and pops like Chipotle's that aren't open because they can't find enough people to work. So, I mean, these are the kind of jobs, though. I mean, in a lot of cases, they're union jobs. I feel like they pay enough where this shouldn't run into those problems, right? I mean, at least, the way that I look at it, that these are jobs that will be created that they shouldn't have trouble filling, right?
I mean, yes, and that's the other good point, is that not only updating the infrastructure, but you're providing a lot of jobs for everyday citizens. So it is a official, it's a beneficial boon to that as well for more jobs. Um, there's bigger issues at play with some of these labor shortages, and in time it will start to equal out. Right now, like anything else, like with the housing market, it's a seller's market. It's the same thing right now, which is a rare thing, is that it's employees have the upper hand right now rather than the employers. And that's why we've also seen an uptick with some union memberships as well. This is a very rare time where the employees really do have an upper hand. And like we are talking about earlier, some people are still flush with the cash that they got during COVID, and those stimulus payments are helping. But in time, you're going to see that is going to wane as well. And so at some point, you're going to see people are going to have to re-enter the job force just because they're not getting those stimulus payments anymore. Those are going to wane. So at some point, employers will sort of have that upper hand again, and people will need to come back and find a way to work. Because even so, some of the people who have stimulus payments right now are still not sitting on a ton of money, and that goes fast. So the next few months will be interesting to see how that kind of shakes out as far as not having enough staff. If that changes, but yeah, as far as these other jobs, they're decent paying jobs. Like you said, a lot of them are union. A lot of them are going to be in the construction industry that will definitely is booming right now, because of housing stock shortages and other things, supply chain issues too. There's a lot of work going around for that. So in the next few months, I think we'll start seeing an uptick of people returning to work, because they're going to lose out on having that upper hand to some degree. But at the time, they have the upper hand, so that's why employers are giving out signing bonuses. That's why they keep raising the minimum wage for most of these employees, and that's why you're seeing a lot of people too just quitting because they don't want to deal with some of the things they used to put up with before from employers. But we'll see what happens in the next couple months.
And on this topic, sort of like the '90s one-hit wonder who gets on TikTok to cling to relevance, former President Trump has taken to really going after the 13 Republican lawmakers who voted in favor of the infrastructure bill. I don't know that you'll entirely disagree. I know you don't agree with the former president on a lot, but he did characterize Mitch McConnell as a quote old crow. So I don't know that that's entirely without merit, but what are we seeing? I mean, this is what always happens. You vote for something, he's basically saying, Trump is, that he doesn't think Republicans should vote for anything, that helps Biden. But in a lot of cases, I think you're seeing, it's still not the majority, but you're still seeing some that are like, this will impact my state more than this idiot telling me, this guy who doesn't even have a Twitter account, basically trying to, get people riled up. So is this just sort of Trump again, just really trying another like gasp for air for really, there's not a lot of air left in the room for this guy.
No, of course it is. Again, it always goes back to being about him because he couldn't get it done during his term, and so if anyone else does it, um, it's a bad thing because he didn't do it, and he wasn't capable of doing it, and he walked away from a deal that was there on the
Yeah.
table for him. So, I mean,
Yeah, I
look,
mean, just as an aside, that was something I was reading too. That in
yeah,
2019, people may not remember, there was a $2 trillion deal, but Trump did indeed decide to walk away from it, probably figuring that in his second term he could get something that he wanted more. I'm not quite sure what it was about the deal. I
well,
don't remember it that well.
it was
What he
I
said at the
believe
time.
I believe it had to do with the wall. There's some wall funding and
Oh,
other
it was the
things
wall.
that
You're right.
Democrats refused to, which rightfully so, refused to put it in there, and that precipitated the entire
How,
shutdown.
how is that
Um,
wall going, by the way? They're still building it?
right?
Is it keeping
Nope.
people out? Oh, okay. Just
Um, Yeah, so that was part of the reason why. But
yeah.
again, because he didn't get it done, his ego is not capable of being able to deal with anyone else moving forward. And like we talked about, this used to be a very simple bipartisan type thing because it's
Yeah.
a win-win for everybody. As you can see, those 13 Republicans have voted for it. It's now they can walk to their constituents in town halls and everything else and say, "Look, we did this for you, and we know it's going to make a big difference." Because again, this should be a bipartisan issue, but in the era of extreme polarization and far right-wing media, that's all about buzzwords and sound bites. This is where we are today. And when you have someone like Trump who's on the outside right now, it makes it even more difficult because he's just going to continue to shout from whatever rooftops he can to try to keep himself relevant and just cause problems for the Republican Party. Which again, they should have dropped him so long ago, but they refused to do it. So it's to their own detriment, like we talk about. But yeah, it is kind of comical to see the infighting, especially with someone like Mitch McConnell, who is definitely the type that is very old school, but knows how to definitely get what he wants at the end of the day. So it's just not the type of person that I think Trump should be fighting with. You need that person as your ally who knows how the inner workings of the Senate and making things happen. You should always have that person in your back pocket.
Right.
So, but Trump never learns.
Yeah, and it's not been a particularly fruitful few days for the former president because his attempt to invoke executive privilege when he is not the president, I think is the judge that ruled against him said that the great quote is presidents are not kings and plaintiff is not president. So it's even like,
Mm-hmm.
even if the president was a king, it's not you,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I can understand the trying to prove that someone who was previously a president might need to keep things secret, but this is not the sort of thing that would fall under that. I mean, the idea that we have we did not have a peaceful transfer of power for the first time since I believe 1860. So I think that I don't know. I mean, I think that they're going to do what they can, and look, I think that there's always a chance that there isn't anything particularly damning, but the lengths that they're going to try and keep this stuff, covered under privilege, means that there's probably some very telling materials that will be found in this. Do you think that that is more than likely that we'll see something that it doesn't even have to be a smoking gun, but encouraging someone to go procure a gun and then allow it to be smoking? Maybe not quite as
Mhm.
hands on, but I think that the reason why he's fighting so hard is because I think that we will definitely get to see something that will implicate him for more than just. I just told people to get together and go take a walk.
Yeah. Well, by the, I mean, the judges. I was laughing when I read her quotes
Yeah,
because she eviscerated him. It was great, and I'm sure he hated every moment of it because she basically was like, "You're nobody now. You're not
yeah.
president anymore.
Hey,
You
like I
cannot."
said, he doesn't even have a Twitter. You and I are both
Right.
on Twitter.
I know, right?
Former
Exactly.
president's not on Twitter.
And it did make me laugh because she totally eviscerated him. It was basically like, yeah, and now you're also trying to affect the current president's judgment and what the current president says, and that's not how it works. So, um, God, I'm sure it just ate him up because he hates the fact that he's not president, and that, again, like I've said before, he never will be again. But the bigger issue again is that it does come down to, and this has happened time and time again. Of course, he's hiding things, and he doesn't want to come out because it'll just be out there for everyone to read at, and he'll have to deny it. And it is going to be damning, and that's exactly what happened with his first impeachment trial. And their whole goal is to slow walk this as much as possible, put up these barriers, and then hope that Republicans take over Congress next year and drop everything. And the problem is, over the next year, drip, 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 more stuff is going to come out, which we talked about. If Republicans were smarter and did a bipartisan agreement to do this commission to begin with, it would have been wrapping up around now. They would have had whatever they had. They would have had their sound bites, but now they're going to just have to play defense over the next year when things are up and running, when this continued bad press comes out, and it's going to affect some sitting members of Congress who are going to be up for reelection as well. So it's going to be very damning for all of them. Not to mention, Trump also has the whole thing in Georgia to deal with too, and that could be a whole other thorn in his side when they do a special grand jury to look into what he did there, which was illegal as well. So to think he's going to cakewalk and just come back in and think he can run again, I think he's going to be sadly mistaken, because it's gonna be very bad for him over the next year or so as far as what's going to come out, and he deserves it all. So I'll be
Well,
sitting back eating my
yeah, and
popcorn.
I mean, to your point about if Republicans had just sort of actually embraced the hearing, let it go
Hmm.
through, for the party as a whole, they would be fine. They would, probably have to oust, a Josh Hawley, Marjorie Taylor Greene. A couple people would probably have to lose their position in power. But honestly, you would have replaced them with someone who's more reelectable in a non-Trump environment. So you'd actually be better off, than you will be, if it comes out that they actually were involved in some way. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think we've heard enough accounts that that there are a lot of people that you will a year from now be like, well, they were not entirely blameless. I think that you do have and you had people who really second guessed their stance once the Capitol was sieged and they were, cowering in fear, and they voted differently, after that. So I do think that we will get the full accounting, and you're right. They could have pulled a band-aid off, and by next year, people could, by next January 6th, people could really be forgetting about it and focused on,
Hmm.
why am I happy right now? Why am I not happy? Who is going to make things better? And yeah, this, because it's not like, if this were the year where Republicans were able to take over, then yeah, spinning your wheels for less
Hmm.
than a full calendar year makes sense. But you had 2 years now. And I don't know that
Hmm.
that's going to work the way that they think. And I think the interesting thing is
Yeah.
now subpoenas happening to having, being issued for Kayleigh McEnany and Stephen Miller, because even though they are in the Trump inner circle, they don't have particularly deep pockets, I don't think, and
Yeah.
I think at a certain point, I, if it's in his best interest, Stephen Miller will tell you everything that he knows. It's just I don't know that he's at that point yet. But when it becomes, you give him something that has the word immunity and he can sign it. Yeah, he might just it's like, all right, let me tell you what happened. So and then Kayleigh McEnany, I think that she was just just the most annoying cheerleader for a high school that everybody hated. But we'll see. It'll
Yeah.
be interesting to, like, if these people are forced to actually testify under oath at a certain point. You can only invoke the Fifth Amendment privilege so many times. There's going to be something that you have to say, I think.
Right, and when you invoke the fifth, you're also basically trying to protect yourself from guilt. So it's
Yeah.
also, it's not saying that you're innocent and you're not just going to answer the questions. You're avoiding it because you know that if you say something, that it could indict you or the person. So I find it funny when people are like, oh, they're just going to plead the fifth or whatever. Well, they're basically, it's the same thing. Like when a president pardons someone, they're basically admitting they're guilty. It's the same thing. If you're pleading the fifth and you're trying to make sure you're not going to say something that's going to incriminate yourself or the person that you're testifying. And yeah, I think again, if Republicans eke out a win next year, which again with gerrymandering and being the opposition party out of power, which usually, as we know, motivates voters more than the people that are in power, it's still not going to be good for Trump. So again, for them to continue to defend this person is to their own detriment because. What is he going to do to protect them? And he would discard them in a moment's notice. So the fact that anyone's going to still continue to try to have his back is sad to me for their own self because he's not going to be there for them when they need it. And with him not being in power or being president, there's not much that he can do to cover for them. So, and I think the biggest thing that people have a hard time grasping is Trump was a CEO, of an organization, which again is very different from the government, where there's checks and balances, and so he does think he can be king because that's all he knows.
Yeah.
Running a family business, he doesn't know that you aren't king when you're president, and you don't have the ultimate say. And there are a lot of things that you have to deal with power-wise that he's learning the hard way. But will he ever fully learn? I don't think so. It's going to take him having to probably go to prison, and even then, he probably still wouldn't realize it because he'll think it was a witch hunt and he was put in for political reasons. But he'll just he'll never understand that. But most of these people that are around him are smart enough to know that, and they should not continue to enable him, but they do, and it's to their own detriment because again, he's out of power. So if they don't testify and give what information is needed, they're only hurting themselves and really not Trump. So
yeah,
on that.
and we're starting to see some recommendations for fairly lengthy sentencing for some of the rioters, including I was reading 44 months for a mixed martial artist who unfortunately assaulted a police officer. The QAnon shaman is looking at 51 months. And I think that you're definitely having examples made of these people. But I think the people who are higher up and didn't set a foot anywhere near the Capitol that day, they are going to start to take notice, I think, and it will be interesting to see. And it may not, I was sort of making light about Stephen Miller, but it'll be people that we don't know their name right now, and they know a lot, and they're like, there's no reason for me to stand up for this guy. He's not looking out for me. Maybe even somebody who tried to reach out. They asked Don Jr. like, I know a few things. You think you guys can help me out? And Don Jr. didn't take their call. So it continues to be, definitely a slow burn, but you don't want to rush this. And like we were saying just a few minutes ago, Republicans are allowing it to be a slow burn like this. It could all be over before 2022 if they would have just let it. But that's not the way that has gone. There's a few other things going on. I think it's always important to take stock of where we are with the virus, with COVID, and approach to it. I think that a lot of people continue to be tired of hearing about it and possibly tired of talking about it. But COVID is not tired of making people sick. So when it can, it still does. And Scott, how many of the variation on this headline have we seen over the last year and a half? A North Dakota Republican lawmaker, his name is Jeff Hoverson. He helped to organize an anti vaccine rally there in North Dakota, but then he was unable to attend because he got COVID. I mean, I don't think you could even create an irony file on your desktop with headlines because you would just run out of storage, I think, at this point, uh, and you see that, and there's a study that I don't think needed to be conducted that said people who get their information from conservative media, and they do include Fox News in there, are more likely to believe COVID misinformation. I would say that Fox is probably the sort of the worst proponent in this because their own actual corporate policies required everybody to get vaccinated. Your Tuckers and your Laura Ingrams and your
Hmm.
Hannitys, they're all there talking to people who say you shouldn't get vaccinated, but they all, if they wanted to keep their job, had to get vaccinated. And they didn't take that stand when they would have been in violation of their contract. I mean, if there's a conservative radio host. His name is Dan Bongino. He ran for governor, I think, of Maryland sometime back, and he told his parent company, which is I think Salem Broadcasting, which is a conservative leaning radio company. He's just like, yeah, I mean, if you make me get vaccinated, I'm just not going to do the show. And it's a fairly successful show if you're in that world. So
Hmm.
we're seeing this sort of this obviously this double speak. You have very few people who are taking a stand, taking a stand on top of their mountain of Uncle Scrooge cash. No one's in their money bin saying like, yes, I am standing up against this. They're like, well, I mean, you can stick a needle in my arm if it means I get paid, $8 million for this month. I mean, so to me, it's like there are probably not that many people disseminating some of this information that really believe what they're saying. They just know that it's like, oh, we are going to get the clicks, we're going to get the viewers if we say like, well, do you really need to get it? I have a friend of mine who shared something that was a screenshot of what looked like an article, but there's no link, there's no name for it. It's just somebody made an article that said, it was just like a very ambiguously phrased comment about you know recommendations for pregnant women against getting the vaccine. So it's not even saying like an expert or some official said it. It's just and it just got commented on as though it were like an actual like news article. And I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts? I know there's sort of a circuitous way to get to this point, but there's so much to see in terms of this idea that that what is out there, most of these people know it's not true, right?
Right, and again, that's part of the bigger problem that we have right now in general when it comes to social media, when it comes to media in general, because now it's all about not just the polarization, but now politics has become uh, a blood sport. Basically, it's a sport and it's entertainment, um, and so part of the problem is that you've taken out what was supposed to be what what politicians are here for, and that is to serve the people, and that's been taken away to the point where it's just all about winning at all against all odds, no matter what. A Democrat could say the exact same thing, word for word, as a Republican, but if they've got the D next to their name, a Republican's not going to vote for them, and vice versa. So it's gotten to a very dangerous point where it's very hard for anyone to be able to see reality. And especially we've talked about in a social media world, you can just be closed off, especially now in this post-COVID world where you can have contactless delivery. I mean, you never have to interact with anyone else that's different from you. And the less that you are interacting and the more that you are reading and listening and watching this any kind of programming, the more that you're going to believe it and be a part of it. And even the people that are saying it, no, it's not true. Like, again, it goes back to we know, and that's what's the ironic thing. All the talking heads saying, "Oh, vaccines are bad." Well, they're the first ones in line that are getting them beyond, Fox News or other organizations requiring it for their employees. Those people will be first in line anyways to get it. So, and politicians again, oh, it should be personal choice, but they're the first in line to get it, and to get their boosters. So, of course, they don't believe this stuff, and of course, they probably are sitting there dealing with a base of voters that are going to listen and buy into everything that Trump says too, and that they're grudgingly going along with it. But if they all had spines and really came back and said, you know what, we've got to move on from this, and they just won't do it because they still feel that that active voter base is going to get out. But like we saw in the Virginia race, you have to walk a tightrope, and it's not going to work everywhere. So they're doing it to I believe, to their own detriment. But it's scary because we're just getting more and more into a separate micro niche media that it's more and more drilled down to very specific people and places rather than what we used to have,
Yeah.
which was something where we all had a common belief and interest, and we had 3 channels to choose from, and we had a local paper, and that's very much changed now to where I don't know how we get that back without it becoming more and more dangerous, because now it becomes nothing but a blood sport, and then for some people nothing but entertainment rather than actual making things happen for the betterment of society.
Yeah, and to that end, I sometimes wonder that if we were able to, basically peer through a looking glass into some other reality where Trump was still president, would MSNBC be the one that's saying, like, you should not get vaccinated because Trump would be president, And I think it's entirely possible. Obviously, it's a hypothetical. We would never know.
Yeah.
But, would your anti-vaxxers and your pro-vaccine, your pro-science people, would they actually, would they walk across the basically the differing picket lines and be like, oh wait, new president, I'm on this side now, you're on that side, we've received our marching orders. And I mean, it's definitely an entire hypothetical, but I do think that it's really like, well, which company line is beneficial to what I believe in.
No, and that's just going back to what I said earlier. It's like if it was a Trump and saying the exact same thing Biden was
Yeah.
saying, you would have a bunch of Democrats that would say no way.
Although, to be fair, Trump did get booed at the rally where he mentioned that he got
Right.
he got vaccinated, and he
Yeah.
backpedaled pretty quickly. But I do feel I agree with you 100% though, that I think that that those would be isolated incidents, and I think that it would just be maybe Aaron Rodgers would be the only quarterback who did get vaccinated. I mean, it would be hard to say what would happen in that.
Look, I do think there would be some of a flip flop, obviously,
Sure.
if Trump or another Republican was president right now. But I believe it would still be less, because if scientists came out and I think more Democrats would be comfortable, and left leaning would be more comfortable taking it, regardless than the opposite. I don't think it would be politicized on the Democratic side as much. Yes, there would be still, but I don't
Yeah.
believe it would be to the point that it is on the Republican side. That's been so extreme that now you're seeing the discrepancies on where the illness is. I mean, it was pretty even last year and at the beginning when the vaccines first came out, at the end of last year and earlier this year. But now you're seeing a huge difference where the Republican leaning places are definitely far behind, and they're the ones where more of the sickness and death is. And I find it, again, ironic that Republicans, but they're trying to put in voting restrictions across the country, but why they would want to basically, in a sense, kill off their own voters, and why they would not be encouraging everybody to get it. Because, like we've talked about, the more people that get it, the more that we finally get out of this situation that we're in. And so it's mind-boggling to me we don't. So I believe if the tables were turned, that we'd still have higher numbers of Democrats rather than Republicans now getting
I
the
think you're right.
vaccine for sure. But yes, there would definitely be, as I said, you could have 2 identical people say the same thing and have one as a Democrat, one as a Republican. And you would have people that would say no to everything regardless, and it would be the exact same thing. So it's just the way we are now.
And the media, of course, is culpable in some of this.
Hmm.
The perception of misinformation. I mean, they will immediately highlight an article that they've written about parents who are hesitant now that there are, emergency approval for vaccinations for children 5 to 11, and if, like me, you have a child in that age range and you have a lot of friends, there is certainly some there's resistance. But I will tell you, the number of people that I follow on social media, the people that are actually my friends on Facebook, who've already posted pictures of their kids getting vaccinated, and sort of the conversations that have come in from there's a lot of excitement. It's more of, oh, finally my kid is going to be safe. And I mean, I've I took my kids for their flu shot yesterday,
Hmm.
and this is just part of that process. My son, who's 6, he's eligible. My daughter's about to be 4, and she's not. But we're planning on getting him his shot right before Thanksgiving. Give him a couple days to get over it, and then his second shot will be right before Christmas. So but yeah, I mean, the everybody that I know who can get it has really. I mean, there's a couple of people who are thinking that they'll get it, maybe in a little bit, but they're not sure. And that story isn't as interesting, I think, for the media, is the reason I bring it up. It's like your parents excited about vaccine. Oh, but you know what will look better as a headline, shared on the Drudge Report or on Daily Mail, is what about the parents who are hesitant? And like I said, I'm not trying to diminish the idea that there isn't a significant number of those people that I actually know that aren't really sure if they're going to do it, and some who are adamant and are definitely not doing it. They're like, my kid doesn't need it, and that's and I mean, the fact that Matthew McConaughey making headlines for basically the fact that he's vaccinated, but he doesn't want to vaccinate his kids because they're younger. I think they're between 8 and 11, maybe 8 and 13, somewhere in that range. And then it's like, all right, well, that's Matthew McConaughey's decision. I'm sure he lives in Texas still. I can't imagine him moving anywhere else. And he's not going to have to. He's not going to have to get his kids vaccinated. So, let's focus on that instead of the what, let's just say, hundreds of celebrities who have probably already gotten their kids vaccinated, and that's a different form of misinformation. It's just sort of skewing the perception. But I'm not really, and I don't know. And I think that the media will do that on any issue. And this is just the one right now. But I don't know. What are you sensing from actual people, not just from headlines, Scott? Not even necessarily in terms of, if a lot of people with kids, but I know a bunch of people who've already gotten their booster.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
I've looked
Hmm.
into, I don't think I qualify yet. I mean, it's been long enough, but I don't think I'm a high enough priority. I was in Nevada over the weekend. I should have just gotten one there. They're just giving them away. It's you
you
show
could
your losings from a sports book, and they'll give you a free vaccine.
right, yeah,
So
no,
I'm sorry. What were you going to say, Scott?
no, I was gonna say I think you could get it here too, and I know that Pfizer has put in for FDA authorization
Yeah.
to allow booster shots for everybody
Yeah.
that wants them. But I know the numbers here are somewhat low for people getting the boosters that are eligible. So it's kind of like what happened in the spring when I went in. I went in up to Kern County, which is north of Los Angeles,
Oh yeah.
and they had so many vaccines that they let me get it a few weeks early before it opened up to my age group and everything. You're right. I mean, right now we're technically not eligible, but we're right on the line of it being long enough that if you want one, and I'm sure you could go into any local pharmacy because the demand has been somewhat lower and be able to get boosted. But I've heard from a lot of people, across the political spectrum, with kids, without kids, in other states, and for the most part, most of my friends and people I've come across are comfortable having their kids get the vaccine because it's been relatively safe. Of course, you can have some holdouts. The ironic thing is that back in the 50s, schools would just jab kids with the measles and polio vaccine. It wasn't even like they were asking parents. It was just back then they were just having it done. And I think I mentioned this on a podcast too. I actually have some really conservative Republican friends that are from upstate New York and a very red area too,
Yeah.
that are Trump supporters and everything. And but they're older, they're around 80, and they could not be happier that the state of New York has mandated the vaccine, because again, they were talking about when they were children, they had to get the polio vaccine, they had to get the measles vaccine, and they find it for them, they're one of the first in line to get the booster shot. And so I found it very interesting to see people that I look at as pretty far right and very much on that Trump bandwagon to say, yeah, I'm actually happy that New York has put this into place, and we're going to go get our booster. So you have people from a certain generation that didn't really have a choice. Like I said, schools and everything didn't go and ask parents permission; they just didn't. And of course, we're in a very different time now, and that would just not happen. That would be very
Yeah.
litigious. But the point is, it happened, and so some folks that are older, that are over 65, that are conservative, are some of the biggest supporters of having this mandate in place and having those accessible and being told you have to have it. So you do see a lot of that, and then you also see people on the left that are very much opposed to that, and you kind of have that extreme where what we've talked about before, where you get the extreme left that don't like vaccines and don't want to be forced, and then you have that extreme right. It's kind of the same thing, and you will get that. But more the people I've talked to are more in support of their children having it than not, because most of them feel, again, that they're safe, and it just gets the ability to get everybody back to a more normal situation. And the hope is that then maybe there's not going to be the mask mandates for kids, and some of the things that we've had over the past nearly 2 years now will be lifted. And so for most people, again, like we've talked about, this will be their real sense of freedom of being able to get back to a sense of normalcy.
Yeah, and I think you also have sort of, people who split the difference where they
Mm-hmm.
fit the demographic that you're speaking of. They feel very strongly about themselves getting vaccinated, but they also realize that it's other people's decisions. But at a certain level, there is the kind of the crossover where you want as many people vaccinated as possible,
Mm-hmm.
but you want them to sort of arrive at the decision where they're choosing to, instead of it being mandated, which I think that there are still many states where that is the case. I wanted to circle back on something before we finish, just because our friend Lynn B is in the chat talking about the Fifth Amendment. And what Lynn B says, that taking the Fifth Amendment does not indicate you're hiding something. It protects you from self-incrimination. And she theorizes, I'm around a crime. I'm not charged. I may or may not be an eyewitness. By admitting, someone coyly get the idea to charge me. Now, Lynn's absolutely right that legally invoking the Fifth Amendment does
Mm-hmm.
not mean you're guilty, but in the court of public opinion, by invoking the Fifth Amendment, it is just like when somebody settles out of court. Well, you paid this much money to someone who was suing you. You must have done it because you were guilty. Now, there's a lot of reasons why a lawyer will tell you to not incriminate yourself, and it is essentially what you're talking about. You didn't do anything wrong, but under questioning, it could seem like you did. So
Right.
just, but when someone does, and I think that that's the point that Scott and I are both making,
Yes. That's
is
what I'm
that
saying.
when
Yes.
people do it, it does not mean that you are guilty. It just means that a lot of people are going to assume you are. I mean, I think
Right.
a lot of us got so that we understood what the Fifth Amendment privilege was when Oliver North was taking the stand, and he just said it for pretty much everything. I mean, that's when I understood what it was. And, there's plenty of stuff he was guilty of. But I'm sure that everything that he, took the fifth on is not something that he knew about. It's not something. It's just like you just say it for everything. And that's sort of what the
Mm-hmm.
policy is.
Well,
So,
that's what
yeah, go
and
ahead.
that's what, and to clarify that, that's what I'm saying. And the
Yeah.
fact is, and I did say that earlier. The fact is, if you say something that could be incriminating, and that's why you do that. And it does, again, look as if you're hiding something. And if all you're going to do is claim Fifth Amendment, then you're basically more or less, that's what you're saying. You're hiding something, or
Yeah.
again, you don't want to say something that could incriminate you or the person that you're testifying against. So that's exactly what I said. But to clarify, yes, it doesn't mean that you're admitting guilt. It's just that you're looking guilty if you're not going to answer things, and you're going to continue
And,
to stonewall. And that's the point. And if you do that as a blanket thing, then you're essentially
and
admitting there's guilt. Because if you have nothing to hide, then you wouldn't have any reason to not
yeah, and
say those things. And
especially
that's what it comes down to with Trump.
if you're Steve Bannon or Kayleigh McEnany or or Stephen Miller, you feel like everybody just assumes you know a lot. and then that's why you're saying it. So, if
Yeah.
you're high profile and you take the fifth, it's like, all right, they definitely know some stuff,
Right,
you know.
right, and then
But
that's the same thing with Trump stonewalling, because again, if they had nothing to hide, then they would be the
yeah,
first to say, "Okay, you can see all the records. We have nothing to hide." But when you stonewall, and when you do that, then you're basically putting it out there that you do have something to hide,
yeah,
and that there are reasons, and that you're hoping you can push the clock far enough that you can now have Republicans take over, and
yeah.
then just pretend it doesn't exist. So that's what I'm saying. By claiming the fifth, you're doing it to your own detriment because you're more or less you're afraid to say something because you're going to incriminate yourself, and so
Yeah.
therefore you have something to hide.
Yes, and we appreciate Lynn bringing those thoughts in there. We love Lynn B. She's a great friend of the old Dennis Miller radio show, and she routinely sends gifts to my children, which I always try to discourage her from, but they're always much appreciated. My son enjoys his subscription to Click Magazine, which is a kids magazine I had no idea about. So thank you, Lynn, and we appreciate seeing you there in the live chat. Well, Scott, our Biden time is at an end for this week, and we will be back next week. But follow me on Twitter at ChristianDMZ to find out when the show will be back next week. And we definitely won't be around Thanksgiving week. It's going to just be too crazy. I got birds to pluck, hams to glaze, and potatoes to mash, and the whole thing. But Scott, if people want to keep in touch with you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at sman80. That's sman80 right there at the bottom of the screen there.
All right. And thanks again to Lynn, Storage Yard resident, and everybody else who watched live. And if you're watching the archive version, please leave your comments down below. I always like to check in and interact with everybody. But that's it for today. And we will see you next week. Bye.